Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Atlantic Trades Business Certificate Program. My name is Paul Tilley, and I'm the instructor for the course. And today we are looking at Topic 2 in Module 1, Module 1 being Human Resource Management. This topic deals with assessing employment needs, recruiting employees, hiring employees, and terminating employees.
In order to make your business succeed, you need the right people. And what does that mean? Well, these people got to have a certain degree of knowledge that is useful to you. You got to have useful knowledge, what they bring from their experience or from their education or whatever. That's what we're talking about with knowledge. Skills. Now, skills are how they apply the knowledge to the workplace. Okay, so we could think of your skills in working with other people or skills in problem solving. These sorts of things. So that's important as well. And abilities, and that is the ability to actually do the work, to create some sort of a meaningful change in the environment or change in the product, or to do something, to be able to take the knowledge and the skills and to make something happen. So that's a magic mix. And in human resource management, those are the three key things that are always brought into the mix. Do you have the right knowledge? Do you have the right skill set? And do you have the abilities in order to make those skills and that knowledge do what it needs to do? Here you are, a small business person, you're just running your own shop. You don't have to worry about that. You are the skills and knowledge and abilities of the company. As you grow larger, though, and you get extra people, this becomes very important because you're going to be paying someone to bring something with them. They're bringing something to the game. And how do you figure out, first of all, how do you go out and find those potential people? And then how do you get them in the organization? And how do you direct them once they're in there in order to make them do something valuable? All of this within a legal environment. In the past 30, 40 years, the legal environment has become much more complex. Since the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was brought in the early 1980s, we have to ensure that everything we do respects basic charter, okay, which is basic rights of every individual in Canada. And the Charter of Rights and Freedom generates all kinds of other laws that we work under now. For example, occupational health and safety, equality rights, labor standards. All of those are impacted by what the Charter has set forth. And every organization needs to have a good understanding of the basic elements of those laws. The last thing we're going to look at tonight is this idea of termination. Now, nobody likes this topic. It's an awful, awful thing when you need to let someone go. But it is a fact, it is a reality that sometimes people come into an organization and they just do not fit, or they are not fit. Something happens that fundamentally breaks that agreement that you have. It's sort of like a marriage. When you go and hire someone, you're committing to them to hire them for a certain length of time or an indeterminate amount of time, and they in return are going to do work for you. First and foremost, let's start at the beginning. We'll start at the beginning. You are a one-person operation and you're thinking about expanding. Okay, you are driving this organization. It's gone as far as you can go, and you're scratching your head and you're saying, "Well, what do I need to do? Where do I start? What is really the starting point of going out and finding some help?" The very first thing you need to do before you even think about going out and letting people knock on the door or knocking on someone's door or putting a door up for people to knock on, the thing that you need to do is to do what's called a job analysis. This is often overlooked. This is a problem in a lot of organizations too. You need to figure out exactly what that person will be doing. Okay. So it involves systematically collecting, analyzing, and interpreting information about what you'll require in a person that you hire to help your firm succeed. It seems simple enough, but so many organizations just don't do it. And that leads to problems because as the employer, you're not going to be happy if you're not clear what you want. And the employee is not going to be happy because they're not clear on what you're asking of them. So you need to sit down beforehand and think about what are those attributes that you need in someone. What are the knowledge requirements of the job? What are the particular skills that that person would need to bring to the job? And what kind of abilities does that person have in order to effectively apply the knowledge and skills to the job? And that there's an acronym for that, KSAOs, which stands for knowledge, skills, abilities, and other important attributes that come in. So you need to think about what it is that someone can do. And as that little graphic I got up there in the corner, you need to think about strategic and critical thinking skills. What do people need to think in this job? Is this a thinking job or is it a doing job? Performance management, how are you going to measure how well they're doing? Project management, do they have any idea how to manage a project? That could be a good skill that someone would want to bring. Communication, that's often one that we need. So these are all learned skills that someone brings to the table. Knowledge could be things like personnel policies and procedures. Someone knows about personnel policies and procedures, or some particular subject matter. If you're dealing with pipe fitting, for example, the knowledge is on how to assemble pipes. That's a basic thing that you need to do if you're a pipe fitter. And uh, the the other thing that comes under knowledge is I got CPUC, which doesn't stand. It's California. I just took this from a California organization, but your organization's practices and culture. Do they have a good idea of what your organization's about? That's a big thing that people want too. Is if you're an organization, you want to hire people who have a clue what you're doing and probably are aware of it and share your passion for it. In terms of abilities, we think of people's ability to mentor or coach, develop, to build relationships, to build teams, to work as an organizational player. And other characteristics could be things like a good work ethic or being engaged or being decisive or being a people person. So these are all key things that you'd often want to find in people. So in your job analysis, what you need to do is sit down and think about what are those things that you need. One of the things too that you have to do is to kind of define your job. So once you figured out what you need in a person, you need to think about how you're going to be able to codify that into a job. This is really writing a job description that outlines what job the person is going to be doing, and that's a challenge too, because sometimes this is easy on paper to do, but difficult in reality to do. So you can develop a job description by writing it down, and it helps you kind of get a sense of what is it you need. So writing it down is very important. Where do you start though in order to write it down? What are some assistants that you can take advantage of in order to help write this down? If you're trying to write a job description, you're going to want to be able to kind of get some good wording to put in the job description, particularly if you're going to publish it online. You want to make sure, for example, that the wording that you use is okay. It doesn't create any or send off any bells and whistles with regards to you can't say that or you can't do that, okay, in terms of the legal aspect of it. So knock codes have a numbering system. And let's say, for example, you're looking for some particular job. You can actually search the knock code. You can go to this search page right here, and you can search, I don't know, I'm going to look for plumber. Okay? And if I type in plumber, it will give me a whole bunch of jobs that fall under plumber and the associated knock code, which is a 4-digit code. So 7251 is plumber. So I'm just going to click on that. And what it does is it gives you a good list of things that you want to put in a job description, okay? Like a well-written or well-defined, like the main duties. What are the main duties of a plumber? Well, the group performs some or all the following duties: read blueprints, drawings, and specifications, and so on. Install, repair, and maintain domestic, commercial, and industrial plumbing fixtures. Locate, mark, position of pipe connectors. Cut openings in walls. Measure, cut, bend, and thread pipe. These are all things that you can pick from. Like it could be considered like a salad bar of items that you would want to put in your job description. You may not have a job that involves the person, for example, measuring, cutting, and bending and threading pipes. So you don't need to include that. But the other ones, if they apply to yours, there they are, well written. They're all of standard design. So it's like, as I say, a salad bar of items that you can choose for main duties. Same thing with regards to employment requirements. If you need to say, well, what are some of the things I should put in my job description in terms of employment requirements? And you can see, completion of secondary school, completion of 4 or 5 year apprentice program or combination, trade certification, the concept of red seal, and so on. Additional information could be, for example, like a red seal endorsement. And there are other types, like, for example, let's say, well, I don't need pipe fitter, I really need sim fitter. And as they're just showing there, you go to another one. So the NAC code is really good for coming up with the terminology that you need to put in a job description. So it's very, very useful in that process. So when you're writing a job description, there's some basic steps that you need to take into the position. And you basically saw them there in the NAC code. So you need to make a list of the position duties and responsibilities. So a lot of those things were there in the NAC. So you can actually take that and cut and paste it right into position duties and responsibilities. Make a list of the skills and experience needed to get the job done. Same applies. What are the normal things that you need to bring that? For example, red seal would be one of the things. Make a list of other important factors required for success in the job. There may have been information in the NAC code there that could be useful for you, or maybe there's other sources of information that you can draw from. But other important factors that are required for success: be able to work independently, having your own vehicle. These sorts of things would come into play. And then you're going to have to do something difficult, and that is decide on a fair salary for the position. One of the things that you really need to do when you think about this fair salary for position is go and look to see what other companies are paying their employees. What's out there? What is widely available? And you can do that by either calling them up, calling the Chamber of Commerce, or you could look at other job ads, for example, and usually these things are all online right now, and say, well, what are other companies offering to pay? So these are all useful. So these key things right here, these 4 key things are very important in order to write a job description, and the tools, as I just showed you, are useful there for pulling that information together. One of the things that you want to do when you consolidate it all is be able to write a job advertisement, okay, an advertisement. So the job description really kind of helps go off and help build a job advertisement. So what is it you're going to put up? Well, you're going to need a specific job title, and the description would have that as well. You're going to have to tell about your business, and that is useful, particularly if you're trying to get someone to come and work for you. You want to be able to give them a little bit of background on what your business is and what your business does. It's short. It's 3 to 5 sentences, as I say. The position details, and that really comes right out of the job description, and further instructions. How should they apply? Speaking of doing something like that, the first discussion activity is you're going to think about theoretical business of yours. You're going to go through the process of what are the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other attributes. Then you're going to write a job description. What I want you to do is just go through the process that we've up above. And this, this could be a little more valuable for you if you were actually to go out and look at the NAC code for the job. I think that would be to go look at those links that are referred to help do this assignment, because you can get a better sense of use these tools in order to listen job description. Well, let's take this even a little bit further, which kind of adds to this by looking at recruiting new employees. Okay, what do you need to do that you've written? So now you've written your job description, you've gone out, you've looked at the NAC, you have it all there in front of you on a sheet of paper, and you say, now what do I do with it, right? So you got to think about, how do I move this forward? So recruiting new employees, there are several key reasons for taking the time to plan effectively, and I think that we've made a strong case for it so far, but here's some more points. Good people make money for your business. If you can find the right person, it means your business is going to be more successful. It is worth your time and effort up front to get the good people. Effective recruitment and selection can give your business a competitive advantage. You know yourself. You think about any organization you've worked for. Maybe you're the good person in that organization, but you know there are star people in organizations that I'm sure many other organizations would love to have. Well-executed recruitment motivates, reduces turnovers, increases productivity, increases profitability. That's important too. If you do recruiting well and you already have employees, let's assume that you're in an organization that has many employees. Doing recruiting well is seen by the employees that work for the organization as a motivator. They know where they stand in terms of their opportunities for growth. They know that the persons being brought in are well vetted. You know, this process allows us to get good employees, so they'll be working with good people. And it certainly serves as it gives a positive sense. It gives a positive sense to your own employees when you do it professionally. Employees' trust is strengthened through effective recruitment selection. If you go out and you go hiring people, use the proper process, it certainly makes your organization look better and it builds that level of trust. It can lead to organizational success. Well, if you do it poorly, it can lead to organizational failure. So certainly, organization is very much its people, so you need a good people. And as you select potential employees, a well-thought-out hiring plan will significantly reduce the risks associated with potential conflicts of discrimination, inappropriate interview questions, and poor performance, poor preference checking. This, as I say, this is a very delicate issue now in today's day and age. So doing it right certainly reduces chances of legal problems. Where can you find these potential recruits? They're out there. They're all over the place. And probably the biggest source is right under your nose. Recruiting from within. Normally, if you have an organization, this only applies now if your organization is a little bit bigger, okay? And you got a number of employees. If you had an option between hiring a brand new person or promoting someone within the organization, okay, what are you going to do? Well, what does it say to people when they have an opportunity to promote it? You put yourself in the position of the person that potentially is going to be promoted now. If you recruit from within, what that does is allows you to hire people from within your organization, promote them up through the organization. It gives them a pat on the back. It recognizes their efforts. It is a very strong motivator for them. For you, it allows you to hire someone who's already familiar with the organization, someone who's been tested, tried and true, and someone who you have a good bit of faith in already. So there's a definite benefit to hiring from within. It's a human resource plus and a management plus. So it's a win-win. Now, your organization has to be big enough to do this, but most organizations, government, for example, or organizations like towns and whatever, will normally try to recruit within first. If we got a job opening, we look around and we say, is there someone within our organization who could potentially do this role? Sources of potential recruits, other sources, job advertisements, help wanted, everything's online. That used to be in the newspaper, it used to be on billboards. No, not anymore. It's all online. And 60% of the seekers, 60% of the jobs get it through online. Employee referrals is a big one too. Your employees are a great source of other potential employees. And that word of mouth advertising is really, really valuable. So if you got employees already, they might be able to put you on to potential new employees. Networking, chambers of commerce, boards of trades, other organizations, Tim Hortons. All of these are networking opportunities to get together and to shoot the breeze with other people and find out who are potential candidates, who out there might be interested. Walk-in recruitment. This is where someone knocks on your door and comes in and says, hey, I'd like a job. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Employment agencies, not too common in Newfoundland, but there are in larger centers employment agencies, which are companies that are in the process of doing the recruitment for you. You go to them and you say, I'm looking for a person to do whatever, and for a fee, they'll go find someone for you. And probably the one that I like the best is the educational institution. And all of us here who are instructors at the college know our students well. And if if a potential employer, and this happens all the time, and you guys out there who are working with me in the college, you know that the employers come on a regular basis and they ask us, who should we hire? Who have you got? Now we're moving to the next step, which is hiring people. Okay, so it's a whole new ball of wax. Now we've got all this potential pool of potential employees out there. How do we figure out which one to pick? Or if the pool is not that large, should we pick either one of them? So again, that right person for the job is someone who has those basic knowledge, skills, and abilities. We need that. But we need to be able to make the decision more objectively than we have in the past. The decisions that are made in the past are somewhat based on our gut feeling as opposed to anything else. And that's often led to some, if they're a lot like ourselves, we tend to prefer them, right? That's the thing. But probably they may not be the best. So there's a biases that we bring into those decisions. What can we do in order to get rid of that bias? Well, objectivity allows us to kind of filter out bias and be able to make a decision based on a bunch of criteria that has to do with the job, but not anything to do with anything else. Hey, even going through that job description process that we talked about at the beginning, it really allows us to sit and think, what are we looking for? What do we need? And we're going to be able to, from there, develop some job-related interview questions. So it gets us thinking about, from our employer, from us as the employer's point of view, we're thinking about what can we ask someone, and we need to ask something that's relevant to what we're doing here. So it allows us to kind of do a little bit of a self-analysis for what we need. We got to develop a good answer key for those questions. And the answer key allows us to say, this person met those points when they answered the question, or they didn't meet those points. So if, for example, you ask about an experience a person had in their past and how they resolved a problem, your answer key, you're going to say, well, I can't write an answer key for that. But you're going to, in the answer key, you're going to ask, did the person tell the story in sequence? Did the person effectively resolve the issue? So these are the kinds of things that you're going to be looking for in the answers. Did the person explain it well enough to be able to clearly articulate what the problem was and how it was resolved? Usually when you get a candidate in for an interview, there's a little bit of a chit-chat at the beginning. You got to engage them in informal conversation, but you got to be attentive too. You don't have your cell phone going or phone going or these sorts of things to throw the person off. And you need to be able to just to make the person relax without getting too much into personal stuff, because again, that could lead to a potential bias. And the hardest one and the most important one is avoid unlawful discriminatory questions, such as asking, what race are you? What religion are you? What age are you? What ethnic group are you? What national origin are you? What political affiliations? What military service? What disabilities? Or other sensitive topics. There's a whole range of things that you can't ask, and we'll look at those in a few minutes. So in terms of hiring, a good rule of thumb is to only ask questions that are deemed essential for the job. Keep it simple. You got to ask of every question that you're going to ask, and you make sure you ask the same question to every candidate, the same set of questions to every candidate, and the same answer keys with every candidate. You got to ask, if I'm asking this question, is this essential to the job? If it's not essential to the job, don't ask it. Document the interview by writing and taking notes. Usually when you do an interview, it's useful to have at least two people interviewing, so that way one person can take the notes while the other one asks questions. Always give time at the end for the interviewee to kind of express his or her questions, anything, and make a final decision and then notify the successful candidate on a timely basis. A structured reference check is also useful whenever you do this, because if you go out and you hire someone without checking their references, that could lead to problems. So when doing a reference check, you ensure the questions are focused on job-related skills as opposed to the individual, And now you ask, well, what does that mean? Well, can they do the job? Do they have the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other attributes? That's the questions that you should focus on. This idea of bias is a real problem in job interviews and job references, and you want to make sure that you want to be very, very careful not to make decisions that have some sort of bias that cause you to say, well, I'm hiring that person because I like them, or they're tall, or they're short, or whatever. So by offering some form of structure to the interview process and the reference process, it's certainly it's not going to eliminate bias altogether, but will certainly reduce it. As I say, the standardization is important. Same questions asked in the interview, same questions asked on the reference are important for when you're going out and doing this. And as I say, a focus on job-related behaviors. Make sure you're talking about the job as opposed to anything else. Ultimately, it all has to be legally defensible. And as an employer, if you're going to hire someone, job-related questions are absolutely legally defensible. In other words, you can ask them. But if you start asking questions that have nothing to do with the job, then you're running in some dangerous territory here. A few years ago, the provincial government here in Newfoundland put together a very good little booklet that I've got here. And this booklet is online, and I think I've got a link to it. If you press on it, you will see a link there in the actual course. I got a link to it. And it's, I don't know, it's about 30 pages long, and it's downloadable. And it's really relatable because it takes out legalese, and it kind of gives it's not a pocket size, but it's a pocket guide to labor relations in Newfoundland. And I must say, I would encourage you all, if you're in the business of hiring, to get this document. Some of the things that document has in it relate to, okay, you've hired someone. Now, what do you do with them, or what rules do you need to follow in the workplace? So if we think about Newfoundland and Labrador, for example, there is a set of legal legislation called Labor Standards Act. And the Labor Standards Act is a complicated piece of legalese. Okay? But effectively what it does is it sets the minimum standards of employment in Newfoundland. So it's designed to protect workers, and you cannot run afoul of it. And if you do run afoul of it, you're running into, I'm not saying anything bad is going to happen to you, but the fact is that it could. If someone were to take it to court, all right, it all based on the fact that if the employee takes it to court and you don't have a leg to stand on, then you're going to lose. So what are these minimum standards that are laid out in the Labor Standards Act? The Labor Relations Act is an act that deals with union workplaces, but the Labor Standards Act deals with all workplaces in Newfoundland and Labrador that are under Newfoundland and Labrador jurisdiction. Well, some minimum standards. Here are the key ones that we find. There are others, but I've just put the key one here. Hours of work. Employers in Newfoundland must grant at least 24 consecutive hours off work each week. So that's one day off. And it does say preferably Sunday. It doesn't say it has to be Sunday. It says preferably Sundays. So that means someone theoretically could work 6 days a week. Okay, the law allows for that. However, employees can also work a maximum of 16 hours a day. So in reverse, that means you have to give an employee 8 hours off by law. Now, there are exceptions. But for a normal workplace, you can't work any longer than 16 hours a day because, again, it runs into an occupational health and safety issue of people deprived of sleep and the like. Now, in emergencies, different story. But under a normal work day, you can't work any more than 16 hours. Overtime. Now, here's an interesting one that a lot of employers worry about, and the way the legislation is written is important. After 40 hours of work in a given week, employees must be paid at least 1.5 times the minimum wage. Not their salary. No, it's 1.5 times the minimum wage. So if you're making, I'm going to say $25 an hour. If you're making $25 an hour and you have to work overtime, some people are going to pay up and say, well, I'm supposed to get time and a half. No, legislation doesn't say that. Legislation says you have to get 1.5 times the minimum wage. Okay, so that's an important one for employers in understanding how the labor legislation is set up for overtime. The other thing is that if you call an employee into work that he's not regular or she's not regularly scheduled for, you have to pay him at least 3 hours work. You might only call them in for 15 minutes, to unlock a gate or whatever. But the law says you have to pay him for 3 hours because the fact is that you did get him out of bed or whatever. Breaks. Employees entitled to at least a rest period of 1 hour following 5 consecutive hours of work. So that means, we normally go to work, let's say, for example, go to work at 8 and 12 o'clock, it's lunchtime. Well, the law says that you don't need to give an employee a rest period of 1 hour until 5 hours into the workday. After work meetings and extra duties, employees are required to be paid to attend meetings or duties that cannot be completed during their work day. So again, this is important for a lot of employers to know. Minimum wage. Minimum wage is set by the provincial government in each province, and the current minimum wage rate is always changing. So right now, I think it's $11.25, but I do have a link there that goes to the minimum wage at this current point in time. Usually it goes up about every 6 months. So the minimum wage rate is defined as 1.5 times, the minimum overtime rate is 1.5 times the minimum wage. The payment of wages is an important one too. The employer must pay an employee no less frequently than half monthly. That means 24 times a year. All wages must be paid within 7 days of the end of the pay period, and wages must be paid either at the place of employment during regular work hours or the employee's normal place of residence or by mail, personal delivery, or by direct deposit. So again, it lays out timelines for how long you can go between paydays, and when the period ends, you got to pay within 7 days. Payroll deductions. The following items can be deducted from an employee's wages. So, and there's a whole list of them. Income tax, Canada pension plan, employment insurance, overpayment of wages, deductions and group benefits, savings plan deductions, overpayment on unused portions of travel advances, rental charges, and sums deducted or withheld by a court order. So, you think about these legal holdbacks, and these legal holdbacks, particularly the government income tax, Canada pension, EI, are dictated by the federal government, and the provincial government supports this in their legislation to say these got to be pulled out of people's wages. Vacations and holidays is another one. Every employee is entitled to accumulate vacation pay from the employer. Vacation pay is calculated at 4% of gross wages, including commissions and overtime. So what happens is effectively that 4% works out to 2 weeks a year. 4% of the year will be 2 weeks. So so for the first 15 years, people will receive 2 weeks vacation effectively by the minimum standards. They have to have 2 weeks off during the year, and it's paid. And after they've worked in the place for 15 years, they go to 3 weeks. So it's 6% of gross earnings. And again, vacation pay is subject to normal deductions. Annual vacation, employees can take 2 weeks vacation after 12 continuous months. So that's in the law. Paid public holidays. Newfoundland has more paid public holidays than any other province, and there are 6: New Year's, Good Friday, Memorial Day, Labor Day, Remembrance Day, and Christmas Day. So you'll see that, for example, Thanksgiving Monday is not on that list. So it's not necessarily a paid holiday. Sick and family leave. All employers must grant an employee who's worked for over 30 days up to 7 days unpaid sick leave. So that's unpaid. After 3 consecutive days, a note from the family doctor is required. Okay. Pregnancy leave, and this is one that is particularly important in our workplaces now as more women enter the workplace. This is new legislation, relatively new in the last 40 years. And again, if a woman has worked for 20 consecutive weeks, they are eligible to go on maternity leave. And employers, at least the employee, got to give 2 weeks notice of when they plan to take their maternity leave. And the unpaid pregnancy leave can last up to 17 weeks upon returning. And then the unemployment system kicks in, so you can actually stretch it to a year and a half. But the fact is, from the employer's perspective, that 17 weeks is critical. Bereavement leave is another key one. And the question that becomes is, the legislation lays out who can you get bereavement leave for? And there's a whole list of the spouse, child, grandchild, mother, father, brother, sister, mother-in-law, father-in-law, grandparent, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law. These are the categories that you can take bereavement leave for. And employees are entitled to 3 days bereavement leave, 1 of which is paid and 2 is unpaid. That's the minimum legislation. So what happens is employer can go beyond the minimum, but they can't go below the minimum. Okay, so the second great discussion activity in here is consider business, like your own business, and using the information presented above. Write a job description for position in the firm. From the job description, develop 5 interview questions. So you've already got the job description written from the previous one. If you want, you can write another one, but basically you've got the job description written. I want you to write 5 interview questions. Now, keep in mind that the interview questions need to be related to the job, what we talked about, what's related to the job. We've taken it through now, so we've planned to get some employees in. We've recognized that we need some new people. We've gone out and looked for people. Now we've hired people, and we've got them working in the workplace. We know the regulations exist with regards to the workplace. Now we're at the end of the cycle. The end of the cycle is, oh goodness, we're about to terminate people. Now, termination could be a good and bad thing. They could leave the organization voluntarily, or they could retire. It could be a bad thing too, in the sense that we really need to get rid of them. So when you terminate an employee, you want to avoid any potential legal repercussions of doing it wrong. You need to recognize that there is often a notice period for people. So if you're going to lay them off, you have to give them a notice period. Now, in lieu of that, if you don't give them news, say, I'm going to lay you off tomorrow, so you can get rid of them tomorrow, but you have to pay them for the time in order to make up for that required notice period. There is such a thing as probation, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing for employers. When you hire someone new, there is what's called a probationary period. And in fact, the probationary period isn't out for you. When you hire someone and that person comes on, you can get rid of them without cause, without any repercussions, for a period of time. I've listed there the time frames, 3 months and up to 2 years, 1 week notice, and so on. So those things are what's laid out. When you hire someone, you want to make sure that they're clear on what the probationary period is, and that you're clear on when that probationary period comes up. Because if you're thinking they're not working out, make sure that they're out of the organization before the probationary period is up. Otherwise, you could face some legal problems. Generally, terminations fall into 2 categories, as I say: a voluntary termination, such as I left or I retired, or an involuntary termination where you got fired. Okay? And the voluntary termination is not too much of a problem. It's pretty straightforward. Employees can leave on their own volition. You can't really stop that. But involuntary termination is when you have to get rid of them. Okay? And the employee is terminated by the employer. Most employees can be terminated at any time for any reason. However, there are circumstances where termination dictates a better approach. So termination can come under 2 categories in and of itself: termination with cause. Termination with cause is a hard one to prove, but if someone is caught stealing, or someone does something to fundamentally ruin the working relationship, okay, that employer-employee relationship, that trust is broken, you're going to argue as an employer that fundamentally it was ruined. That would be what we call termination with cause. So in the event the employer has a sound job-related reason to terminate an employee, such as the employee's incompetence or absenteeism, then we say the employer dismissed the employee with cause. And under such circumstances, it can be argued in law that the fundamental employment contract was broken by the actions of the employee, and the employer owes no further obligation to that employee. Now, the court may look at it differently, but you will argue if you're going to fire someone because they did something so egregious to you that you had to get rid of them. If you can prove that in court, you will owe them nothing. The other thing, though, is one where we want to get rid of someone just because. And this is what's called termination without cause. So the employee needs to be escorted out the door for some reason. You don't like them. You don't want to see them. You're tired of them. It could be something silly like that, or it could be the lack of work, whatever. It doesn't matter. But this creates a problem for you because you need to be cognizant of the fact that the employee can come back on you if you don't reach a good agreement. The common law looks at this as no more than a legal contract being broken. And they're going to ask, was there some reason for that contract to be broken? And if it was, then the courts will agree with you and side with you. If it wasn't, and the court says no, the employer broke the contract, then you could run into some legal problems. So you need to be very careful when you fire someone without cause that you pay them the notice and you say to them, there's no cause here, but I'm going to pay you and escort you out the door and you're going to thank me for it. That's basically what you need to do without cause, is make sure that when the employee leaves, the employee got some money in his pocket or something to compensate him for that being escorted out the door. You could argue, that the person was incompetent, but if they work for 4 years, someone's going to ask the question, well, if they were incompetent, did they get incompetent the last day? Because you've had them 3 years. You had lots of opportunity to get rid of them. Why didn't you? So the incompetence argument doesn't necessarily work easily, particularly in law. Okay, the last great discussion question: consider the business that you have. Imagine you just come from a meeting and you found that you lost a major contract and you had to let an employee go, or another employee was caught stealing from the company. Consider each case. Neither can work for you any longer, and let the discussion on termination discuss how you would handle each. So that's what I wanted you to do there, is to be able to kind of think how you could handle legally this situation of termination. Okay, so that's a good bit of material there this evening. Are there any questions? We've gone through the whole gamut of the process and right up to the end there. So I think that that is a lot to chew on there. I want you to take a look at those assignments, and hopefully you can internalize it a little better by doing the assignments.